Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. In today's video, I'm going to finish up my last set of 2022 rookie positional rankings. So the last 2 days, I've gone through my top 8 running backs and top 8 wide receivers. And today it's time to talk about the quarterbacks. It's just going to be a top 6 because these are like the consensus guys who are probably going to be going in the first 3 rounds. Maybe all 6 go in the top 2. But let's just jump into number 1, and that is where I have Malik Willis out of Liberty. Really, since the Senior Bowl, his draft stock has kind of risen into the first round in the same area as guys like Matt Corral and Kenny Pickett. And when we're looking at all of these quarterbacks in this class, I think he clearly has the highest fantasy ceiling of any of these guys. You know, this class does have some other mobile quarterbacks like Matt Corral or Sam Howell, in his final season. But Malik Willis is just far more athletic than any of these other options. In his 2 years as a starter, in those 2 years combined, Willis rushed for 1,822 yards and 27 touchdowns. So that right there really tells you everything you need to know about him as an athlete. As a passer, he definitely has some clear pros and cons. On the positive side, I'd say he probably is the most impressive arm in this class. He has the ability to push the ball down the field. He can zip balls in on the money on more intermediate routes. And then he also has the ability to throw fairly well while on the run. So not only can he make plays with his legs, but he can use his legs to get out of the pocket while also delivering balls on the money. At the next level, I do think Malik Willis will likely have to shore up his accuracy just a little bit. And he's also probably going to need to improve that decision making. This is stuff that's pretty common for basically all these quarterbacks as they take the leap to the NFL. I think it's probably best for Malik Willis to take a year and sit as a backup, kind of like a guy like Trey Lance did. I feel like that just can kind of help his development and give him the best opportunity to succeed. But if Malik Willis is able to receive that first round draft capital, either ahead or in the same range as Kenny Pickett and Corral, I really don't see why he wouldn't stay as my QB1, just because we've seen how dominant these Russian quarterbacks can be in fantasy. Because not only does Malik Willis have the ability to rush like that, but I also think he has the weapons, physically to be a very solid passer. So we saw a guy like Jalen Hurts, right, finish as a solid quarterback 1 because of his rushing ability. I think Malik Willis can be that same quality of rusher, but when we're just talking about raw arm talent, Malik Willis is going to blow Jalen Hurts out of the water. So that's kind of why I have him here slotted in at number 1. Moving on to number 2, I have Matt Corral out of Ole Miss. He broke out as a redshirt sophomore, throwing for 3,337 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. He also added 506 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. There were also some pretty clear positives and negatives from his 2020 season. He definitely showed flashes as a playmaker, but he did struggle with his decision making. As you can see with those 14 interceptions, just turned the ball over too many times. But heading into 2021, he definitely improved a ton in that area. He threw for 20 touchdowns compared to only 5 interceptions. He also added 614 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground. I think Corral definitely has the arm talent and has shown the ability to zip passes from sideline to sideline with accuracy. He also has the ability to make plays outside the pocket, just like a guy like Malik Willis. Corral doesn't have the elite arm strength, which can affect his deep passing, so he can throw the ball with some velocity. But when we're just talking about complete arm strength, I think he's definitely lacking a little bit in that department. I'd say one of the biggest concerns for Matt Corral is just his overall size. He's definitely not a super small guy. He's 6'1", 205 pounds, but can that 6'1", 205 pound frame survive his physical play style? He's not a quarterback who avoids contact. He kind of honestly invites it. So will he be able to hold up, under the bigger NFL bodies? We'll just kind of have to wait and see. I would like to see him kind of come in at like 210, 215, either at the combine or his pro day. Now moving on to number 3, I have Kenny Pickett out of Pitt, redshirt senior. He was a 4-year starter there, but he really wasn't seen as a top quarterback prospect until this past season. In 2021, he really just blew all his other seasons out of the water. He threw for 4,319 yards, 42 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. Pickett is primarily a pocket passer. The most rushing yards he had in a single season was 233, but he's definitely not, back there as just a total statue. I'd say most people view Pickett as the most NFL ready quarterback, which could very well be true. He has a ton of experience. He's the prototypical 6'3", 220-pound kind of pocket passing quarterback. I'm just not sure the ceiling is going to be there on a fantasy football level for Kenny Pickett. When you're looking at the top 12 quarterbacks in points per game from the 2021 season, 6 of them rushed for less than 300 yards. So, 6 of them kind of didn't have that super mobile production. Here are the 6 quarterbacks: Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, and Kirk Cousins. All those guys are fantastic quarterbacks. And I think if we're looking at Kenny Pickett, say everything breaks right, he's the starter, he performs fairly well. I feel like, the best case scenario is he is a Kirk Cousins level quarterback. So this still kind of seems like a reach. And I don't know if I'd have a ton of shares of Pickett, just the way, fantasy is going to favor these very mobile quarterbacks. But, with first round draft capital, I do think he'll be given the opportunity to be the starter, which does warrant a spot here in the top 3. Now at number 4, I have Sam Howell out of North Carolina. I'd say right now I probably like Howell a little bit more than consensus. I think there's one kind of clear thing holding him back, and that is just his draft capital. It kind of seems like, it's very likely that Willis, Corral, and Pickett are going to go in the first round. I don't think we can say, confidently that Howell is a locked-in first-round pick. Heading into the 2021 season, I think most people view Sam Howell as a top 10 pick, in the 2022 draft. He performed well as a freshman and then made key improvements in his sophomore season, and he really just balled out as a sophomore. Threw for 3,586 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions with a 68.1% completion percentage. This past season in 2021, Howell definitely regressed in most of those categories. He only threw for 3,056 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions with a 22.5% completion percentage. There are multiple factors that led to this down season for Sam Howell. He lost multiple key offensive weapons to the NFL. That included Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, De'Ami Brown, and Daz Newsome. The offensive line also let Sam Howell down in multiple different matchups. Really had him just, scrambling for his life back there. The one bright spot that did come out of the 2021 season was Howell's newfound playmaking ability on the ground. He wasn't, a statue his first 2 seasons, but he definitely didn't put up anywhere close to the 828 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground that he did in 2021. With his 6', 220-pound frame, I don't see why he won't be able to take that mobility to the next level in the NFL. And if Howell does receive first-round draft capital, I do think I'd be very likely to move him ahead of Kenny Pickett just based on his overall ceiling because of that mobility. Now at number 5, I went with Desmond Ridder out of Cincinnati. Ridder was a 4-year starter there, put up, relatively similar numbers from 2018 to 2020, but then made some key improvements in 2021 where he threw for 3,334 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He also added 355 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Ridder doesn't have the mobility of a guy like Malik Willis, but he can definitely make plays on the ground and outside the pocket. I'd say he has a fairly gifted arm, but he does kind of struggle with consistent accuracy. Right now, it doesn't look like Desmond Ridder is going to be a first-round pick. Looks like he's going to fall more in that day 2 range. Personally, I just don't have a ton of confidence in Ridder at the next level, but if he is given the opportunity to be the starter, I think if things break right, he could be a solid mid to back end quarterback 2 option. And now the final quarterback on this list, number 6, Carson Strong out of Nevada. I'd say he's probably the most pure pocket passer in this class. 6'3", 220 to 225 pounds. Basically zero playmaking ability with his legs. I'm not going to BS you and say he has some potential there. He probably doesn't. He's not a complete statue. He can maneuver around the pocket a little bit, but he still kind of struggles with pressure given that lack of athleticism. He had a great 2021 season, threw for 4,186 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Also had a 70.2% completion percentage. So all of that looks great. I would say at the Senior Bowl, he definitely kind of underwhelmed. I think a lot of people thought he was going to have the strongest arm in this class. It didn't really look like that at the Senior Bowl. that seem to be lacking. When we're looking at fantasy purposes, Strong would have to be a very, very good real life quarterback to be a solid fantasy option. I kind of talked about it with Kenny Pickett. Those guys, Brady, Rodgers, Dak, Stafford, Kirk Cousins. I think there was one more in there. You need to be a really, really good quarterback to perform well if you don't have that rushing upside. Carson Strong does not have any rushing upside, and I just don't think the odds are great for him to become a quarterback in that same echelon. So that's why I do have him here at number 6. That is going to wrap it up for my 2022 rookie quarterback rankings. I think tomorrow I'm going to do like my top 12, probably super flex. Maybe I'll do like top 12 super flex and then top 12 one quarterback. I'll see. Just stay tuned for all that stuff. If you haven't seen my other rankings, go check out my running back and wide receiver videos. Thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.